Welcome to Lions Live 365. I'm your host, Michael Ayers, and today we are talking about the draft. I'm going to give you guys a draft guide for the edge position. I feel as though a lot of Lions fans do not understand, what kind of edges fit in our system, how big they need to be, do they need to be a power edge, a speed guy? And a lot of times people just ask for things that they want. They ask for sack production, but at the same time, we need to be able to do both. We need to be able to stop the run and get to the passer. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a small recap on some of the edge rushers that we've passed on, and I'm also gonna tell you some guys that are going to be entering into the draft that can actually be on the radar for the Detroit Lions. That way, you're not listening to some draft pundit that's out there like, oh, they're going to pick some 6'3", 235-pound guy, knowing damn well we're not drafting that guy, right? So let's talk about 2025. Let's take a step into the past. So when you look into it in the past, right, these are the most productive people that were drafted in 2025 at the edge position, right? The best person being Nick Scoring with 5 sacks. Mike Green had 3.5. Donovan Izaraku had 3, and Josiah Stewart got a couple sacks as well. Now, these guys have potential. I'm not saying they are scrubs, but I am also saying these guys were not going to move the needle for us whatsoever. That's one. Number two, Nick Scoring we could have kind of squeezed him into the scheme, but at that point we wouldn't have Tate Ratledge, right? And he was kind of important this season. And then we have Mike Green and Donovan Izaraku. People wanted him in the first round, right? One, they don't fit our scheme. They're too small. And when I say they don't fit the scheme, our power edge needs to be able to hold up in the run game against like a guard and tackle at times. And neither one of these dudes are good against a run with just the tackle. So that's just the reality. Now, the one guy that fit the size profile that they wanted, that was drafted after our pick, was Landon Jackson. He had 0 sacks, right? He couldn't even get on the field for the Buffalo Bills, who are starving for edge help. So that to me just shows you that it's so difficult to find edge in the draft, and the idea that you're just going to draft a position doesn't make sense. So a lot of times what will happen is Brad Holmes will show visible frustration when people just hammer a position, knowing very well, one, there weren't that many good guys with their deck that could do what we do in our scheme that'll work. They just weren't available, right? Let's go back 20. We can go back one more year, right? When we go back another year, in 2024, no one in the 2024 class drafted after the Lions' first round pick averages more than 4 sacks a year. So if you remember the 2024 class, they had Jared Verse, they had Latu, and those players went before our pick. No other edge rusher picked after our pick has averaged 4 sacks a year. So with that being said, when you look at it, we are kind of holding Brad to a borderline impossible standard when it comes to drafting a edge rusher. Let's move forward. Let's talk about this year. Right? And how our scheme limits talent acquisition at times. These are fan favorites that even if they were there, if they fell to the Lions, they would not be a Lion. They're too small, right? So David Bailey, Cassius Howe, R. Mason Thomas. Now, they're just not going to be picked by us, even if they fall to us, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're going to change your scheme, you're going to change your scheme for a known commodity. If you're going to change your whole defensive outlook, your whole defensive scheme, you're going to change your defensive scheme for like Michael Parsons or something like that. You're not going to do that for a rookie. You don't even know if that dude is good for you to be out here changing your scheme for him. But with that being said, these guys can really, really get after the passer. But unless they fall into the 4th or 5th or 6th round, they're most likely not going to be picked by the Lions. If you want to understand why that's the case, I just want you to understand how draft capital works. If you draft a guy in the higher rounds, you need them to play a bunch of snaps. if you cannot see that person playing on first or second down, then you really you can't invest high capital. You can't invest valuable draft capital in something that is only going to be available to you on third down. Same thing with paying people in free agency. The smaller guys that don't fit our scheme, or especially in what we do, first and second down, are just not going to be priorities. I know it's frustrating for the fan base. It's frustrating for me, but at least I understand why. Okay, and there's a lot of people just being very upset with Brad Holmes, not understanding it has a lot more to do with our defensive coordinator and our head coach. So moving forward, this particular draft actually has some guys that fit the scheme that have some real talent, right? Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'd be very upset if David Bailey fell to us, because after we don't pick him, oh, the outrage and the backlash is gonna be insane. But moving towards the prototype fit, the guys that fit exactly, and I mean exactly what they want. We have the Ruben Baines, the Keldrick Falks, the King Messidors. LT Overton is a relatively unknown name by a lot of people. Same thing with Anthony Lucas from USC. These are the guys that fit exactly what we do that are in the top 100 according to PFF. I haven't done top 100 at all, but I'm just literally posting it as I see it, and I could basically pick through who would fit in our scheme, who wouldn't, just based on size, arm length, play strength, and then any character concerns that a player can have. We don't do character issues. We might do a little injury history. Hopefully that can change. But at the end of the day, we usually go with extremely young players when we can, and we go with strong, high motor, high football character guys. So when it comes to like pass rushers, if you see an inconsistent motor, it's a good chance he's not getting picked. If you see struggles against the run, he's most likely not getting picked. But this prototype fit, these are the guys that are bigger. These guys are 280 and up for the most part, and they have strong hands. They're great against the run, and this is the problem that we run into in a lot of drafts, right? So first and foremost, where are we picking, right? Ruben Bain, we're not going to be able to sniff Ruben Bain. He'll probably be going in the top 5, top 10 picks, right? Keldrick Falk is a good combine away from being a top 10 pick as well. Okay? And even if he was available, he has some concerns with his pass rush ability. Like as a pure pass rusher, he does need to develop. The thing is, he's going to be 21 years old on draft night. That dude has a lot of potential, right? But he's not as polished as Bain, and he's nowhere near as polished as Messidor. Then we go to Messidor, who is the 33rd ranked player according to PFF. Akeem Messidor is finna be 25, and he has injury history, right? So let's say these two, Ruben Baines pick, Keldrick Falk is picked. That leaves us Messidor, LT Overton, Anthony Lucas. And now, are you going to pick a guy that fits your scheme, but probably 16 picks too early? That's a little rich, right? Do we trade down to try to get these players at a price that makes sense? Because I'm gonna be honest, of these 5 that actually fit our scheme for sure, only 2 of them are bona fide pass rushers that I would just be like, oh, I have zero doubt that they can rush the passer, and that's Ruben, and that's Bain and Messidor. So are you gonna pick the man with the 401k? The grown man, 25, right? He's literally had an additional college career compared to Keldrick Falk as far as age is concerned. So, he has a really high floor, but how high could his ceiling be at 25? LT Overton, a completely developmental player, hasn't shown the ability to do any one thing consistently, right? We got Anthony Lucas, injury prone, has a lot of issues. He's 71 for a reason. So when you look at all of these things, this is the prototype fit. And I'm literally looking at all 5 players that fully fit what we do. In the first 2 rounds, that's 4 players, and 2 of them are going to be most likely picked before we get a chance to pick anybody, right? So now, let's go to the next thing, right? The next thing is the people that's strong enough to fit. We can make them fit, right? We have the TJ Parkers, the Gabe Yakis, Zion Young, Deni Dennis Sutton, right? We can force them into these roles, right? TJ Parker has enough play strength and he can win with explosiveness. He is essentially a guy that's perfected like one move and just needs to find a way to create a counter for that move. He's a little smaller than they would usually like, but at the end of the day, with his explosiveness and his power and his ability to set edges, just maybe he can be a first and second down guy, right? Same thing with Gabe Yakis. He actually used to play at a heavier weight. He used to play at like 270, 275. Shows up at Senior Bowl as a lean 260. Does he even want to play in a scheme like ours? And then we got Zion Young. He had a little run-in with the law, and at the end of the day, I know how Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell really doesn't do anything that even seems like a character issue. So they did their due diligence. I know they talked to him at the Senior Bowl, but who knows if he's even on their radar, right? And then we got Deni Dennis Sutton, who I love looking at his tape. I like his pass rush ability. I love everything about him, really. But at the end of the day, he's projected as a 3rd-round pick. Most likely is a combine away from being projected a 2nd-round pick. And he's probably the closest to fitting into the scheme without having to do too much. He could probably gain 5 good pounds, get a little stronger, and they'll be like, all right, we got our power edge. But when you look at that, right, when you look at what I'm talking about, the way our scheme requires such size limits what we can do. Now, if they change the scheme, we'll notice very quickly, because we might see a Cassius Howe or a Joshua Josephs or somebody that is a speed burner that'll come off the edge. But if you see one of those names that I had in green or one of these names that I have on this list, just know it's more of the same as far as the defensive scheme is concerned. And that's it. I just wanted to make sure y'all got a draft guide that made sense so that y'all can view the draft through realistic lenses. At the end of the day, they may decide to make changes. They did say they were going to evolve, but if they stay with the same situation, the same scheme, because I don't think it's going to change too much with the same defensive coordinator, I just want y'all to be prepared, right? I'm also going to be doing a ton more episodes and things like this, either like draft guides or breakdowns for specific players or what ifs, just to give you guys some content while, we're in the boring stages of the NFL. Before free agency kicks off, I'm going to be doing some free agency stuff too. But at the end of the day, please do not be fooled by some fool on TV telling you that we're going to draft R. Mason Thomas or Cassius Howe or Joshua Joseph, or don't be too mad if they pass on David Bailey if somehow he slips, right? Because at the end of the day, they have a plan. It's not like they hate the edge position. It's one of those situations where in the draft, they just haven't had the opportunity to get their kind of guy. And unfortunately, because of the scheme, their kind of guy is hard to get. And whether it's game day, draft day, or any day in between, it's Lions Live 365. Please like and subscribe. Peace out.